So in this case, this is the major replacement effect of which has been talked by Arrow, and critiquing what Schumpeter has pointed out. So critiquing that the incentive under competition are indeed much more as compared to the incentive under the monopoly to innovate. Now this critique, the Arrow's result which we have got, they are also being critiqued. Some of the important points which are some of the important points with respect to this critiques are, first of all, they're talking about the process innovation, then how it will translate into product innovation, that has to be seen. Not only that, one very important point which has been missed is that for conducting this R&D, there would be ex ante cost incurred for the innovation process. Now, where will those costs or where will that money will come from? That is an important concern, whereby you will find that availability of the resources particularly is high with the firm which is now having a probable market power. So competition, if you now think from a point of view of a business who has a monopoly, they always have this fear that there is a potential threat to the entry. So if in a particular market entry is rather free, the fear will make the businessmen or the large businesses feel that they are in a competitive situation even if they are alone. So the entry circumstance, whether they are, under what circumstances entry restrictions are there, will become very important to know. Moreover, the availability of the resources that I have already talked about, that the investments in the research and development activity will indeed happen beforehand. And now think from a burdened supplier point of view, who is making a zero economic profit, where they will get the resources to invest in the R&D. So if you look in this case, so this is the advancement in the literature which talks about the relationship between market structure and innovation following the work of the Schumpeter. So let us look at these developments. What we have talked about so far is that of the replacement effect. Essentially, incentive to invent is less under monopoly than the competitive conditions. Following that, what we find, there has been a discussion and talk about an interrelationship between market structure and innovation, whereby what you find is that what you find in this case is that the market structure feeds into the innovation and the other way around as well. What do you mean by that? So Phillips, in his work in 1966, pointed out that there can be a two-way relationship between market structure and innovation. Let us say, to begin with, there is a circumstance of maybe a competitive or maybe a duopoly. Some firm actually invest in R&D through maybe they make available resources through borrowing or maybe some other way. And now if the firm is able to innovate and come up with a better product or a process, what you will find that it will change the market structure in terms of the increase in the market share of that particular company. If indeed they come up with a product for which no substitute is available, clearly a monopoly will be established. So then it is not only that the market structure would be a circumstance or a condition beforehand that will contribute towards whether the firm will undertake innovation or not, but the result of this innovation which has been undertaken will also feed into the change in the market structure that will follow that. In that sense, Dasgupta's work is also, they have treated market structure to be endogenous, and it's very positive correlation with the industry-wide R&D. In fact, they have talked about in their model they have talked about that whether what is the market structure of the product market where we are looking at, and what is the competitive circumstances in the R&D market. If most of the firms are also getting engaged in the R&D effort, it will lead to over investment in the research and development, which may not be found to be appropriate by the social planner as such. So this idea of a feedback effect, whereby the market structure essentially leads to certain amount of innovation activity, which then feeds into the changes in the market structure, has also been empirically verified further. Then here the further results have also highlighted that many a times the existing monopolists would in fact engage in the R&D activities essentially to preempt the entry by the innovating entrant, because as we saw in the earlier slide also, that there is always this fear, this threat of the incumbent, that somebody else may come along with a better product or a cheaper process and they would be driven out of the market. So such R&D investments are undertaken essentially to preempt entry by an innovating entrant. In general, what will happen? The incumbent will compare the monopoly profit vis-a-vis the duopoly profit. This kind of a discussion on incumbent entrant competition, in fact, that will depend upon other circumstances in the R&D sector also. For instance, it will depend upon uncertainty in R&D. It will depend upon the technology ability and the distance from the competitor. It will also depend upon the knowledge accumulation, and these are the key results which are there in the literature. So what we have found is that the studies have found that there is a link of appropriability condition. That means how easy for a particular firm is to gain or to commercialize and monetize their intellectual property, with the probability of a success in R&D and the payoff received. So what will happen if, let us say, start with the circumstance that patent protection is perfect, right? So if the patent protection is perfect, that essentially means that all the benefits from coming up with the new intellectual property, either in the form of a new process or a new product, will be gained by the innovator. As the competition will increase, here you will find that the more and more investment will undertake place in the research and development. Why? Because the monopolist can in that case continue with their monopoly position. Yes, and because of the strong intellectual property regime which will be there. However, if they find that the imitators can benefit, maybe even if not completely, a certain benefits are now being made by the imitator, then what will happen is that increased competition will in fact delay the innovation, because the monopolist will always be fearing that in any case their results are going to be copied by the others. Another study has highlighted that there are 4 important characteristics of an influence of a particular firm which will influence the outcome of this kind of a race. The race which they have talked about is that of a patent race, whereby we are not only talking about the investment which has been made in research and development, but also the race which is undertaken to ensure that the outcome of that research and development investment essentially lead to a patent. So in that patent race, essentially ability to conduct R&D, and also what is the distance from the finishing line. They have concluded that even if a monopolist does not possess better R&D capabilities or R&D stock, the potential entrant may be deterred at the very outset of the race by virtue of the monopolist's great incentive. Now, here the argument is that the incentive for the monopolist to protect their monopoly profit is much larger. As a result, an entrant may rather be deter to in fact invest in the R&D itself. If initially that is not the case, then a monopolist can make considerable investment in the R&D to give a threat to the potential entrant. If these investment projects are going on, there are all the talks about that how a monopolist has invested in these kind of a project, clearly the entrant would be deterred. So these are the different types of models which in economic theory effectively look at the incentives of the monopolist. They will talk about the different circumstances. They have added the conditions, whether it is with respect to the uncertainty of R&D or whether it is with respect to the motivation of the new entrant, and that is how the theory has developed. However, one important contribution in this theory comes from the works of Professor Agion and his co-authors. Here, they have talked about a very interesting inverted U-shaped relationship between innovation and competition. In their work, they have pointed out that the competition can have a positive effect on the innovation, for those firms which are close to the frontier. So the basic intervention that has been given by these authors is the idea of the distance to the frontier. So there is a frontier essentially whereby you can say the lead firms are and how far the other firms are located with respect to that frontier. The distance itself will influence whether the firms will be motivated to invest in R&D or not. So they talk about two types of effect, escape competition effect and a Schumpeter effect. Escape competition effect is essentially when most of the firms are near the frontier, they are there is an extremely competitive circumstance, they are neck and neck and they want to escape this kind of innovation. That's kind of a competition. So thereby the investment will be rather large. On the other hand, if there are many laggard firms, right, and the firms are already falling behind, and the competition under those circumstances is once again increased, then the motivation of the firm would be to not invest in the R&D because they would be demotivated to do. The example which has been given by Professor Agion is like, let us say in a class there's a fair competition, but again a normal curve kind of a circumstance whereby you have some student doing very well, some average, and some are now below average, and a new smart student enter the class. The student is very intelligent. That means the existing set of the students who are near the frontier, who are very bright, they would in fact enhance their efforts to do the to compete with that particular student. Whereas the one which are laggard, they may rather not have that kind of a motivation. They would rather be discouraged or demotivated by that. The overall effect of that in that case is an inverted U-shape result resulting from this composition effect. Where is the composition coming from? The composition is coming from the positive effect, which is the escape competition effect, whereby the motivation to invest in R&D is rather high to escape this kind of competition vis-a-vis a negative effect, which is demotivating the firm. So bringing them together is what you have is a composition effect. That is what is written here. Escape competition effect, when the competition is weak. When competition is weak, firms below the frontier has strong incentive to innovate to become the frontier firms. On the other hand, so the innovation activity would be increasing. When competition is strong, it spurs frontier firms to innovate, whereas below the frontier are rather demotivated or discouraged as such. So what you will find that at a lower level of innovation, what you find it increases as the competition increases, the demotivating or the discouragement effect becomes rather prominent, and as a result overall innovation activity may go down. So now we talk about that having understood this kind of a relationship that is there between the market structure and what kind of an incentive are being created for the firms to innovate under those circumstances. A very obvious question arises is, what are the results that we have obtained from the empirical research? I think we have talked about it earlier. Empirical research essentially means that you are collecting the data from different countries or the firms within a country or across countries and trying to find out the relationship. Here, if you remember at the beginning of the lecture, we did talk about the different measures to compute the competition, which are used in the different studies. So, HHI index, learner index, there might be a variation in terms of the index which will be used by the studies to capture competition. Apart from that, you will find that there are different measures which are available in literature that will be used by these empirical studies to understand R&D expenditure, patent, citation weighted patents, number of researchers and scientists, new product sales, number of new product, productivity. So these are the different measures which are used in the literature to understand the innovation activity. If you look at R&D expenditure, number of researchers which are being used by the companies, basically these are the input indicators which goes into the knowledge production function and lead to an outcome. What could be the outcome? The outcome could be patent. But can you say that all patents are same? Then the question is that may not be the case. Some patents may be more important. They would have much more, let us say, a leap that might have been made in terms of technological advancement. As a result, there is need to check for the quality of the patent. In order to check for the quality of the patent is what you find is that the citation weighted patents are used. Once again, citation weighted patents are also output based measure for the innovation. However, the question then is being asked, and also kind of a critique of the use of research and development expenditure and also that of the patent is that all of that research and innovation may not actually translate into the introduction of the new products in the market. So, if that is the case, then there is once again a distinction between what do you mean and understand from innovation, because if the product or the new product is not introduced in the market, how can we say that it affects the revenue and again the market structure of the particular industry? So, in order to answer that, there are other output based measures which includes new product sale, number of new products and processes that are being also introduced. The last measure, which is also a very popular measure, is the impact of the entire this innovation activity, whether we are talking in terms of investment in R&D, patents that have been taken, are on the productivity of the particular firm. So, once again, these are the different measures which are available in the literature that helps the empirical investigation, because they are being used to capture innovation activity. So, what are the kind of results we find? The results are again, in fact, as I said earlier, it is one of the most investigated hypothesis in industrial organization. Then clearly we have, a lot of surveys also being done. Let us talk in terms of the some of the recent studies. So, there are studies which has found a result which is favorable to them. For instance, in the context of the Japanese manufacturing firm, the authors have found the non-linear relationship between competition and innovation. Tingwall and Podwall has also found a non-linear relationship between competition and innovation in the Swedish manufacturing sector. And they found that this inverted U-shaped relationship is supported by HHI index but not by the Lerner index. This is essentially to once again point out that the measure that you are using in order to capture either the market competition or the market power or that of the innovation activity can also bring in the differences. So, once you are doing any kind of an empirical research, you should be very careful about it. Then they also show an inverted U-shaped relationship is more sharpened in case of a neck and neck forms which are very close to the frontier. So, then what you have another set of studies which are contradictory or maybe may not found a very strong positive result. Here, please remember, the empirical result is essentially related to an inverted U-shaped relationship which has been talked about more recently. So, a study by Korea indicates the theoretical model by utilizing a similar data set to Aegeon. They found that while competition has a positive and significant impact on innovation for a period 73 to 82, this relationship became insignificant between the other period. Again, another study by Korea and his co-author note the positive relationship between innovation and competition for US firm. This study shows that in a well-defined patent regime, firms innovate more when they face high competition. So, here like if you remember, we talked about what are the circumstances of the appropriability regime in that particular industry. We find that the patent regime is well defined, but on the other hand, there is a high competition. There is a competition that the entrant may come. So, once you find a strong impact. On the other hand, in the Spanish manufacturing sector, what we find, the data suggests that inefficient firms innovate in the face of exit threat, leading to a positive relationship between innovation and competition. In the Indian context, this study by Dhanora et al., they do not affirm an inverted U-shaped relationship between innovation and competition. Here, they have found that the competition amongst the Indian firms is rather not very intense. There is a large prevalence of the laggard firms, the firms which are far below the average level of the technology frontier, and as a result, they are not very motivated to compete with the other firms. The results have found that indeed at the top, at the frontier level, there are few firms which keep on, kind of, you can say, strategically competing with each other for a very simple reason that they want to survive in the market. And then there is a whole set of laggard firms who are now not motivated to invest in R&D.